President Trump has threatened a billion-dollar defamation lawsuit against BBC for splicing together two different parts of his January 6th speech. Joining us to discuss is Bobbie Anne Cox, a New York attorney and legal analyst. She's also a fellow at the Brownstone Institute. Bobbie Anne, great to have you here on this afternoon. So what would Trump's lawsuit against the BBC hinge on legally?
So legally, this would look like a defamation lawsuit. And in our country, defamation lawsuits can only be successful if the plaintiff proves basically four intentional issues. You have to prove as the plaintiff in a defamation case that the defendant made a false statement about you. That's the first thing. The second thing is they have to prove that it was communicated to a third party. So the statement couldn't have been made just in private between you and the other person. It had to have been made public to a third party. They also need to prove that the defendant acted with actual malice because this is the president of the United States. He is a public figure. And therefore, it is a higher standard that has to be proven. You cannot just prove regular negligence in this instance. It would have to be this higher standard of actual malice, meaning they intended to make this statement with malintentions. And then the final fourth thing that has to be proven in a defamation case for it to be successful is that there was an actual harm that was actually sustained by the plaintiff as a result of what the defendant said or did. So this is, these four things would have to be proven by the president against the BBC. In relation to this editing of his speech from January 6th, 2021. And if he can prove all four of those prongs, then the case could be successful. So yes, this is a straightforward defamation case. There will be questions as to each one of those four prongs, particularly whether or not it was published to a third party within the United States, because the BBC is, of course, a government media station, and it is in the United Kingdom, right? It's British. So that's going to be one of the hurdles in this case, but certainly possible.
Okay, so Bobbie Anne, I actually have a clip here with me. So before I ask you the next question, I'll play this comparing the edited version versus the original. So take a look.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Now, Bobbie Anne, the BBC chairman actually admitted that the way the speech was edited did give the impression of a direct call for violent action. So, I mean, is this an admission? Does this count as an admission of liability?
Well, certainly, first of all, I'm glad that you played that clip just now. It really shows the viewers what was done by the BBC in their editing of the speech from January 6th. They took two different parts of his speech, which occurred almost an hour apart, and they strung them together to make it sound like President Trump was saying, let's march down to the Capitol, and I'll be with you, and let's shake things up, in essence. So that's not anything at all what he said. And I mean, this is a problem. I mean, we have, the BBC is a prestigious news organization. They intentionally did this editing, which was very obviously a negative attempt to portray the president of our country in a negative light. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that this is something that could be the basis of a defamation case. And did they admit liability? That's going to be an argument. Certainly, if there is a lawsuit filed by the president against the BBC, that is going to be an issue that is certainly raised. That, hey, look, they said sorry. They made a public apology, and could this be deemed an admission of guilt? In my opinion, yes, it can. But that would be something that would be raised certainly during the course of a trial if it gets that far. And the fact that two of their top, as you mentioned earlier, two of their top personnel at the BBC have resigned over the weekend because of this. So, is that an admission of guilt? Well, certainly that would be brought up and put into evidence, I would think, by the president and his legal team if this did indeed turn into a lawsuit and if that lawsuit did indeed go to trial. So those are two important things and a very good question in this instance.
Okay, so Bobbie Anne, earlier you raised the issue of whether this documentary was played in the U.S. or not and the potential legal hurdles. Well, reports are saying that the BBC said the documentary was not broadcast in the U.S. Is that going to present some challenges if Trump brings a lawsuit to trial?
It could potentially cause some issues. It could be a hurdle that the president would have to jump over in order to successfully have his claim of defamation. The reason for that is, BBC, as we said, is a British-based media company. They're claiming that this was something that aired only in the UK, not in the United States. President Trump can't sue in England for this because they have a 1-year statute of limitations, as I understand, for defamation cases. So he would have to indeed sue here in the United States. It's being said that he would sue potentially in Florida if he does bring a lawsuit because that's his primary residence. So yeah, there would need to be some sort of proof that people in Florida did see this particular documentary. And because that, as I said in the beginning, that is one of the prongs of this 4-prong test in order to be successful at having a defamation lawsuit, is that you have to prove that it was communicated to a third party. And as a result of that, injury did take place. So, if they can prove that this was only aired in the UK and no Americans, particularly Floridians, saw this, then that could be a hurdle and a block to a successful defamation lawsuit. But, in the world of the internet today, even something that's aired only in one country does not tend to stay solely in that country because of the internet and the capabilities we have there. So I'm not sure if that would be a valid argument to block a successful defamation case. That would be something that the court indeed would have to decide.
So then, Bobbie Anne, on that note, what is your analysis on whether President Trump has a strong case or not?
I think that he does have a strong case. If you look at the facts overall, you look at the video, which you showed earlier, the clip of what was actually said during his speech on January 6th, and then what the BBC edited. And then you take into account the fact that, the BBC apologized publicly for the poor editing of that video. The fact that they had two of their very highest personnel stepped down as a result of this. All of these things play into, evidence and whether or not this would be a strong case. And clearly there was malintent. This aired in the UK just a few days before the November election last year, and certainly did not portray President Trump in a positive light. So I do think that they have a strong case here. The question will, of course, be, do they bring the lawsuit? Does the president actually bring the lawsuit against the BBC? I understand his attorneys issued a letter to the BBC demanding that there be a public apology and some compensation. And I believe the deadline for that is this Friday, the 14th of November. So, we have to see if the BBC complies. And if what they do is sufficient, according to the president's demand letter. And if not, does he take this to court? Does he actually file the lawsuit? Those are two big questions. We have to see how that pans out. But if he does file the suit, I think he has a strong case here. It's certainly the evidence is mounting, and you can't actually, say, hey, listen, I'm a foreign entity and you can't sue me because I'm not a U.S. corporation. The BBC does have presence in our country. They do have, at least in New York and I believe in LA, they do have offices. They do operate here in our country. So this is something that is certainly opening the door to a viable defamation lawsuit. So we'll see how this plays out in the next couple of days here.
Well, all right, Bobbie Anne, I think we covered just about every aspect of this. Really enjoying hearing your analysis. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for having me on.